So welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is on the other AAA, the people who don't start your car, and the area agencies on aging and who they are and what they do. And I'm going to flip over here real quick to a few introductory slides. And as I do that, I want to remind everybody, stay on mute if you would, please. If you have questions along the way, put them into chat, and we will have time for questions after we get through the presentations. So just hang on to those if you would, and then I think that's the basics for us to get going here. So our panelists today are the executive directors of three different AAAs, three of the 16 AAAs in the state of Colorado. So Jody Barker, who's with the Pikes Peak AAA, Eva Veach, who is with Region 10 AAA on the western part of the state, and Christine Vogel, who is with the Boulder County AAA. So I'm Bob Brocker, I'm the moderator today, and our executive director is Barbara Boyer. So these are the, if you click on any of these, these are the websites for the different AAAs. And a little bit about AgeWise Colorado and what we do. We launched our website last summer. So we've been at this now for about 9 months. And our goal is to be the premier resource hub for aging Coloradans and their families, to help people age well and age wisely. We focus on folks who are either in this sandwich or on this side of the sandwich. So that's nearly almost 3 million people, will be pretty soon, over the age of 40 in the state of Colorado. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about that just a little bit. And why is it important? Well, it's important because, as many of you know who are working in this aging field, the line crosses here in just a few years between the number of people over 65 and the number under 18. So we're on a trend for having a much older population in the state, which is driven in large part by the fact that so many people moved here a few decades ago. So it's only a natural thing that would happen. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but unfortunately, it often is. So what are we doing? We are focused on providing this hub of information and vetted service providers. And I really want to emphasize vetted, because we do spend some time checking folks out before we put them on the website. So many of these websites that you see, if people just pay, then they'll be on there. So we're very careful about that. So the areas that we cover, as you can see on the screen here, technologies, end-of-life planning, financial planning, wills, estate planning, healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid. It's a home notifications. It's a wide variety of things. And we've been having webinars on a regular basis now, 2 a month, to focus on these different topics, and we'll continue to do that. So who do we serve? All older Coloradans, adult children of older Coloradans. Our service providers, they are our customers as we see it. Employers. So if you think about the fact that employers have people in that 40 to 60 age group, it's just a way to provide another benefit to those employees to help them reduce stress and provide support when they get in those situations. And some of you have already been in them, I'm sure, where you're now dealing with a family member that needs some help in some fashion. And for businesses in general, just being able to show support is a social benefit for all Coloradans. The other thing I wanted to show you real quick is this is our upcoming schedule of webinars. So obviously today is April 6th. April 21st, we're going to be talking about hoarding and where does the line cross between hoarding and just plain clutter? A lot of people have clutter. I have clutter in my office, but I don't consider it hoarding. But you've probably been in homes where you see that, and we're going to be talking about that and how to help with those situations. And then home modifications coming up in May, and age tech. I mean, this is a huge topic. Technologies for aging are just exploding, and we're going to provide some grounding in what that really means and what's going on in that area, without diving into too many specifics, but we will talk about that. And then downsizing and home sharing, and then healthcare at home. And then we'll be developing a schedule for the next couple of months pretty soon. So that is who we are. And what I'd like to do next here is introduce our panelists for today, starting with Jody Barker. Jody is the director of the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging, which serves 3 counties, El Paso, Park, and Teller. So it's got urban and mountain mixed in there together. He served many roles in his 24 plus years in senior service organizations in Colorado. Among those have been editor of the Life After 50 newspaper, director of operations for a home care agency, Central Colorado regional director of the Alzheimer's Association, and as director of the Colorado Springs Senior Center. Jody's greatest joy is matching services with seniors and their families, or enabling staff and services to do so. Jody has served on various boards and commissions over the years, including the Colorado Commission on Aging, which, by the way, is undergoing a pretty major change, and the U.S. Aging Board of Directors. Eva Veach has worked in the field of aging services for nearly 30 years. She's worked in skilled nursing homes and opened 3 Western Colorado assisted living communities. Eva has also managed a senior transit program and the Montrose PACE program. She's a strong advocate for the rights of older adults at a local, state, and national level. Her passion is supporting the independence of older adults and helping people make educated decisions before they're in a crisis. Always a good idea. I wish more people would do that. She's been the director of community living services for Region 10 since 2013. She manages the Area Agency on Aging, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program, and I hope one of you will speak about what that is. I'm sure that'll happen. Seniors Companion Program, RSVP, and the SHIP State Health Insurance Assistance Program. Eva is an active altruisan, and I'm sure she'll tell us what that means. Served on the governor's behavioral task force and is a board member of the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging and a member of the Care Ministries Board. And finally, we have Christine Vogel, who is the division manager and director of the Boulder County Area Agency on Aging. She's been in this role for 3 years now and serves as vice chair of the Colorado Association of Area Agency on Aging, which is often referred to as the C4A. Prior to her work in Boulder, she worked at Mental Health Partners, serving Boulder and Broomfield counties for over 20 years in various roles focused on outpatient and community-based services. She's been working with the older adult population for about 8 years, and more so since she became the director of the Boulder County Area Agency on Aging. So those are the introductions. And now we're going to launch into the presentations as soon as I get this fixed. And I need to stop this and start it over again, I think. Okay, so Jody, Eva, Christine, who's going to speak first? And if you're on mute, remember to unmute.
Thank you very much. I'm tired of that word mute, right? It's been a long haul. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And Bob and Barbara, thank you so much for inviting us to share today. We're just going to dive right in here so that there's plenty of time. We want to make sure that there's also time, not just for our presentation, but also for any Q&A at the end. So make your notes and we will we'll come back around for some Q&A. So again, my name is Jody Barker. I'm AAA director here in Region 4. And as Bob mentioned, it's Park, Teller, and El Paso County. And so we have as he also alluded to, we have a major urban area, but also rural and even into our frontier area in Park County. So quite a diverse area of service provision. So next slide, please.
Okay, there we go.
The purpose of the Area Agency on Aging and the services that we provide is really to help people age well. That is going to look different for every single person, and the beauty of AAA's within our service structure and our funding sources, we can accommodate many different needs. And overall, we provide and fund those services to support people to stay in their home. And so I think that's one of the very crucial things that we talk about in our region, and this language is really statewide and national from a AAA perspective, is whatever that means to that individual. Home is going to look very different from person to person, but the biggest goal is for them to remain as independent for as long as possible. And so the services that we'll be talking about today, you'll start to see that theme, is making sure that people have access to services to remain as independent as possible and to age well. We also provide a lot of quality information, assistance, and services. So every AAA operates just a little bit differently, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Our ultimate goal is to advocate for our older adults and those family caregivers, but also putting into place plan for current and future needs. And what that might look like obviously will vary from person to person, circumstance to circumstance, but also including family caregivers in some of those conversations as well. Next slide, please. So Area Agency on Aging, we are a federally mandated program. It was written into law, federal law in the mid-60s and into Colorado statute in the mid-70s. So we receive our both the authority, our directives, and our funding comes through the Older Americans Act and the Older Coloradans Act. And as Bob mentioned earlier, we are 16 area agencies on aging within Colorado, and each operating a little differently. So it's important to understand that not just the AAAs in Colorado operate a little differently from one another, but really this is nationally. So what I can speak to specifically in the state of Colorado, we have AAAs that are part of what are called Council of Governments. Those are typically governmental organizations that are in membership together to maximize funding and programs and projects for their region. And so my AAA is part of the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, so we are a division within them. Then others are part of Department of Human Services. Others may be part of county structure. And even further, we have several within the state of Colorado who are independent 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So there are enough differences within the operational structure that we do want to make sure that you're aware of that, so that if you should call one of us and then another, understand that our operations and services do vary just a little bit. Next slide, please. And you'll see how that works as we work through this. So area agencies on aging really vary in the type of overall services. There are enough similarities in the services, but there are also differences in how they operate. Next slide, please. So some AAAs directly provide certain services. They may contract out with local providers for other services. They may contract out 100% for services, or they may keep 100% of their services internal. That distinction is important because if you've worked with or have questions with your local AAA, but then perhaps are calling a AAA in Ohio, where a family member lives, and you're trying to coordinate services on their behalf, it is important to understand that there are operational differences and where those services may be provided. Overall, though, we provide information and assistance services, options counseling, case management services. Those are typically short-term case management unless stated otherwise. It was referred to in Eva's introduction about the SHIP program. That's a state health insurance program. It's a division of the state division of insurance, but that really speaks to benefits counseling across Medicare and Social Security and many other areas. Bob also mentioned the Ombudsman program. Typically that is an advocacy program for clients of all ages who live in long-term care settings. And so our Ombudsman team and staff are advocates, are the voice for those who may not have a champion, may not have an advocate. We provide caregiver support programs, volunteer programs across the state, and those also look a little differently. So some AAAs may have volunteer programs around chore services, yard and garden services. There may be volunteer ombudsman program services and that kind of thing. Next slide, please. We also fund or directly provide services like transportation, nutrition programs, which vary again across the state. Those may be home delivered meals, either solely operated or in partnership with Meals on Wheels. That also may include nutritional programs at senior centers or community centers, typically referred to in our world as congregate meal programs. And so it varies again across the state. We also may fund or provide directly in-home non-medical care or other in-home assistance. Sometimes those are most commonly provided through voucher services. We also may provide, I alluded to the chore work, some yard work or caregiver support. Again, the caregiver support is really crucial in that it really focuses on family caregivers. Those family caregivers who either out of necessity or desire to become the family caregiver for a spouse, adult family member, parent, find themselves in a place that they need support, whether that's in looking for resources, understanding the changes that their family member may be going through related to disease, dementia, or Alzheimer's, and so many others. We have an entire division here at the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging called the Family Caregiver Support Center, where family caregivers can call in, do family consultations with our staff, and receive support for their specific circumstances. The funding also provides for legal assistance and importantly also respite care. This is a part of the voucher family caregiver support programs. Next slide, please. Now, additionally, these services may include education around fall prevention, so perhaps a mobility class through a senior center or hospital or clinic. There are also opportunities for education around chronic disease self-management, health promotion, overall education. That education may be directly health related or not. Typically, those are offered through community centers, senior centers, and others. Then we also will contract out here, again, speaking to in the context of my AAA, we contract out for services for the blind and visually impaired. We have 2 contractors. They have, while their overall focus is education for blind and visually impaired, there are enough differences that there's that folks can choose which one fits their needs more practically. We also talked, along with the chore side of things, many of us do either have programs internally or contract out for some sort of home repair or modifications. I know for Region 4, where I am, we saw quite an increase in handrails being requested at the beginning of COVID, and really in the first 9 or 10 months of COVID, when people realized that they were staying at home longer, realized the deficits that they had in their homes. And so our home modification contractor was exceptionally busy during that time. We also, through contracts here, offer hearing aids, and others provide hearing services, as well as vision, additional vision services like glasses. We also do fund mental health services. That will vary across the state based on the services within each region. There are also funding. There is also funding for direct Native American services. And I believe Eva may be able to touch on that a little bit. But then also, as part of the family caregiver side of things, there are supports for grandparents raising grandchildren, also called kinship programs, because sometimes it may not be just a grandparent. It may be an uncle or aunt or other family member. But there are supports for those, especially when the individual is over 60. And that's something that we didn't really touch on. The beauty of our programs are that anyone over the age of 60 may access Area Agency on Aging programs, Older Americans Act programs. And so that's very important to note, because that is the primary definition of who our clients are. And so with this, I'm going to hand it off to Eva, who's going to begin with the next slide, please.
Thanks, Jody. So as Jody has talked about, certainly keeping older adults safe at home requires really being proactive. And our programs are designed to identify potential problems before they come up and try and resolve them ahead of a problem whenever possible. So that requires a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and nobody's better at identifying needs and really developing resources than the AAAs. And certainly during COVID, we all had to pivot, there's that word, and learn how to really get creative with what we do. Here in my region, we understood very, very early on in COVID that our older population was really fearful of coming out. I've got a client who still to this day doesn't even want to come out of his home for his regular blood draws. And so trying to figure out how to address that, one of the things we put into play with some of our additional COVID funding was a community paramedicine program. And with that program, we engaged with the EMS and ambulance program. So far, we only have it going in one county, but just between January and March, we prevented 29 ambulance rides to the ER. And this is, again, another really proactive approach to getting folks that are in a crisis situation the care that they need. But 9 times out of 10, those emergency situations can be dealt with in the home safely. The paramedics call the individual's physician, they get orders, they treat right there in the home. It saves the system a lot of money. It certainly is a whole lot easier on the patient. But what we really wanted to do as a AAA was have those paramedics be able to identify what some of the red flags were, and especially in the case of people that are frequent flyers, and calling paramedics on a regular basis. What's at the core of some of those problems? Is it safety issues? Do they need grab bars? Do they need wheelchair ramps? Is there food insecurity in the home? Is there a lot of clutter? Is there an opportunity for us to come in with some in-home services? So by working really closely with those people that are obviously at high risk, we're able to partner with paramedicine, not only avoid hospitalizations, but also get our services in for those people and be more proactive. So those are just some of the things that all of the AAAs are really good about. Next slide, please. So if you look at the growth of the aging population, it's projected that between 2016 and 2050, this wave of wisdom is just going to get bigger. So if you look, even 10 years ago, when I started working in the AAA, the 85 plus cohort was really climbing. And now when you look at these statistics, 85 plus and 95 plus growing at 489%. It's kind of cool, but in our role as AAA directors, it's a little bit scary too, especially in frontier areas. Next slide, please. So understanding the impact of COVID has killed nearly 1 of every 100 older Americans. And the statistics are really grim. Next slide, please. What we know about COVID is 8 out of 10 deaths from COVID in Colorado have been in those 60 and older. The increased isolation has really impacted older adults. It's definitely increased anxiety and depression. And all of the AAAs have seen a significant increase in older adults who are needing more services: food, transportation, financial assistance, in-home services. We were already seeing a pretty significant decline in the number of people accessing senior centers and our congregate meals program. But I do believe that there's going to be a certain percentage of people that will never feel safe in congregating again. So we've again had to find some real creative solutions to how do we help them maintain a social life, maintain their social interactions with friends and family, and how do we address the senior nutrition and the food insecurity issues, especially in food deserts that unfortunately in Colorado, in our rural and frontier areas, can be really, really challenging to meet. And then older adults are being evicted. They're experiencing rent increases a lot because of the rising home prices. A lot of renters have experienced their landlords saying, well, I think it's time to go ahead and sell this house. I'm sorry that this has been your home for the last 20 years, but it's time for us to sell. and there's nowhere else for those folks to live. And in C4A, we talk about this frequently, that you know, it's a real problem throughout the state that older adults need affordable, safe, accessible housing, and it's just not there in a lot of areas. So we're very concerned about that. Staffing shortages due to COVID have really limited the care options that are available for both in-home services and inpatient care. But again, the AAAs have risen to the occasion, and every day we're all looking for creative solutions to how we can address that. Next slide, please. So every 4 years, we are tasked with doing something that's called the 4-year plan, or our area plan. And so we are in the process of getting ready to start that plan again. And that really is how we determine as AAA directors how we're going to provide services for our individual communities based on the needs of those communities and the available resources. And so we do that by, there's something called the CASOA, the Community Assessment on Older Adults, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the coming months. It's a very expensive, comprehensive survey that we did a few years ago, and it tells us statewide, gives us a lot of information. We'll be assessing the impact of COVID. We all do annual customer satisfaction surveys. That's a requirement of the State Unit on Aging, and those surveys went out in February. We'll be conducting community conversations and meeting with seniors in most of our communities around the state, meeting with community leaders, and we'll be participating in regional planning, really trying to figure out what's missing in terms of supports and services that help keep people safe in their homes, in their community of choice. Next slide, please. Turning back to we missed the impacts of COVID. Nope, we got that one already. That was my last slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
I would help if I unmuted. So thank you so much. Okay, so continuing on in terms of development of new resources, as Eva was reviewing, the sort of areas that are, again, important to focus on include education around the aging population, how AAA services can help people age well. Again, somewhat of this is, has been identified through the presentation, but these areas along the right are really where we want to focus our efforts. We want to be collecting data and updating data, whether that's GIS data, local data, information about older adults in terms of what they're needing, where they're living, how do we focus and identify those services to best meet individuals' needs to remain in their home. Also, in terms of the need to consider development of resources, increasing state and federal funds. Always important to consider also sustainability over the long haul in terms of diversifying funding, So when we think about a mix of responsibilities, right, healthcare, insurance, businesses, grants, all of those things are extremely important to add to also the state and federal funding, because again, the projection and statistics of the environment that we're in is we're gonna need to have all of us at the table with all of our resources planning together for the future. So let's move into our next slide. Oops, did I miss something? We'll go on. That's all right. To the other really important item that the AAAs do, which is really advocacy. So originally, when the statute was written, they are specifically called out advocacy for older adults in the Older Americans Act and the Older Coloradans Act. And this is an area for older adults in the community that we as AAAs take very, very seriously in terms of advocacy. Advocacy on the individual level, advocacy on the systemic level, and then advocacy on the state and federal level. So important that we really call that out separately. We really focus on that, particularly at the C4A, as well as individually as AAAs with our staff and our councils. We can move to the next slide. So areas to call out specifically around our advocacy on the many levels that are available. On the individual level, in terms of long-term care issues, problems with benefits, accessing services. These are all things that we take very seriously in terms of advocating for older adults if they are experiencing a challenge related to that. So long-term care issues, we have our Ombudsman programs. We also many times are getting involved in supporting individuals as in the community as best as possible with what they need, whether that's, are they having trouble signing up for Medicare? We offer the Medicare counseling as we were talking about, or are they having trouble just accessing services in general? Whether they're services that we provide or a different agency provides, we will advocate and support that older adult or family accessing the resources that are needed. The systemic issue is a much more probably larger, complicated issue for all of us. And there are many, many factors contributing to the challenges. However, we want to remain focused on advocating that housing, transportation, nutrition, and again, access to services might come from a systemic, we need to use a systemic lens in terms of how we approach that. Many times, as what Eva was describing in terms of our planning, the area plan that drives our focus of services in the community from the state is one area. Some regions also participate in a strategic plan in the community, and that helps that really focus on those systemic areas that need advocacy and support. In terms of state advocacy, what the AAAs have done a very good job of over many, many years is advocating for increased funding, really just tracking the really important information that our population is growing and we're all aging all the time. It isn't just a older adult situation, it's for all of us, right? Like we're all on that track, and really we need to continue to advocate for increased funding for services. It is not a static item. What's also really important that we know is it's not just increasing funding for the specific services. Services are super important, but the infrastructure to support the aging population has come into very large view that we really need to look at that overall and how we're really going to address that. An example of where we could see our advocacy really moving to a funding success is what's called Senate Bill 290, which is a newer funding stream that the Colorado legislature is working through with us in terms of AAAs to really consider, okay, well, do we need a new computer system, or is there a new senior center that needs to be updated? Or, those infrastructure needs that really don't fall into the specific service type of regulation that the State Unit on Aging supports us with in terms of the money coming through the state unit. And then finally, on federal advocacy, we can see just areas where we definitely, as a AAA, are supporting COVID relief, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, transit funding for older adults, and then increased flexibility in funding, which again addresses the idea that services are necessary, vital, and important, but then there's also infrastructure and requiring some flexibility around how to make that happen. And we'll move to the next slide. So, when to call your local area agency on aging. It's important to note you need to call when you need information, supports, or services, when you would like statistics or data on older adults in your area, and then when you would like a presentation about the AAA and or aging in your community. And we are all open to providing a presentation or connecting with you or joining other meetings about issues facing older adults and all of us working through the service provision and infrastructure needs. And with that, we'll go to the last slide, which I think has all of our contact information for Jody and Eva and myself, our phone numbers and our email addresses. And I think, Jody, we were talking about possibly moving ahead with questions at this time.
Yeah, I think if that's all right with Bob, we can open it to questions if that's appropriate, Bob and Barbara.
Sure, please. Does anyone have a question? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Hi, this is a really good presentation. It's something I've been wanting to know about, and so I really do appreciate your efforts. What a wonderful service you provide. I had a question. I'm a vendor, but and I was just wondering, I know things have just changed, COVID and whatnot, but are you planning on opening up opportunities for vendors to come in and do senior fairs and training, that sort of thing about their product? Does that look like something that may be coming up soon?
Are you referring to becoming a contractor with a AAA?
Oh, we already are. But
Oh, okay,
in the
okay.
past, we could, maybe bring in some lunch and do an in-service, or sometimes they had vendor fairs where they referring employees would be able to just ask questions and know more about what's, what is specific about each product. There's often a lot of us out there, and sometimes I know in some states they suggest that if the client does not know which vendor they want to use, that they kind of do a round robin on who the referring employee might be offering. But I know it's mostly about knowing what's best for them and more about the product.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here first. It really is going to be, it is going to vary by each AAA. So
Okay.
depending on who AAA is in the area that you're serving, I would certainly reach out to them. There's generally a staff member, whether directors like us or other staff members who manage that kind of thing. I know that for us, and I'll speak specifically to us here.
Thank you. Yeah.
If we have a client and there's, we go through, and in fact, all of this really, all AAAs are required to do this, is go through a client assessment to really determine, and that's where the case managers come into play, because they determine what those needs are. And many times that's also takes a bit of intuition and reading between the lines. What is it they really need? What other services are they needing that they don't realize that they might need? So they may call in for transportation, but we also realize that they need meal services or low vision supports, things like that. So our assessments across the board, this is with any AAA, serve to differentiate those needs, and then how clients might be referred out are typically by a narrowed list. Even though, and I'll wave mine here, it's my old one, we're getting reprinted, but we produce what's called the Yellow Book. And you can see it's a half-inch thick. I may give that to a client, but I'm going to be very specific to say these are some services that you may need. Typically, we do not arrange those services unless they're part of a voucher system, where there is far more information being shared to connect them with services. As far as the vendor fairs and things like that, COVID definitely put us on hold on that. Here in our region, we actually do that. Typically in the spring, we hold a vendor fair where not only our board members can understand more fully where our funds are going and get to meet all of our vendors, but opportunities for public involvement are also made as well across the year. So.
Oh, that's great. But that's probably not going to be happening this spring, maybe next spring. Is that your thought process?
Hard to say. We'll see how it goes. We're hoping, normally we would have done it normally we would do it in February. We're probably looking at something a little bit further in the year as things open up. I'll let Eva and Christine speak to that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm with ADT Medical Alert Systems, and I work with the entire state. And I'm just trying to, and I'm new in my job, and I started right before COVID. So I didn't get to, get to know people and understand and make those connections that I would have liked to. So I really do appreciate this. I understand more what you're doing and trying to, and I'd really like to be able to, connect with your care coordinators, or use care, would your people, I'm calling referring employees, but are they called care coordinators? Are they called case managers? Are they called social workers? What in the AAA world?
Sure, in that area, it would be our case managers.
Case managers.
But,
Okay,
but,
thank you.
but specifically outreach as far as contracting and that kind of thing would be a whole different line. And you're welcome to send me an email here afterwards. It looks like Bob put all of our contact information into the chat. So yeah, we can talk offline about that and get you connected.
Thank you so much,
folks.
Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And here in Western Colorado, there's something called Beacon Fest. That's kind of a big vendor expo like that. And that's usually held in Grand Junction and in Montrose in the fall. And we participate in that as well. We used to have a caregiver expo every year, but we've kind of backed off of that for a couple of years. So we'll see about redoing that maybe next year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, we had a question from Larry Clark about your yellow book, Jody. How to get that? I think it's online, isn't it, on your website?
Yeah, so the couple options. Larry, if you live in the Pikes Peak region, we'd be happy to point you to your nearest distributor. They're through our Pikes Peak Library District. You can get them there. You're always welcome here in the office. We're at 14 South Chestnut Street. Or the senior centers around town have them as well as just a whole slew of distribution sites. So if you'd like, feel free to pop me an email or let me know where you are, and I'll get you pointed in the right direction. If you're in Park or Teller counties, they are also there as well with our providers. So just let me know where you are, and I can get you to the closest distributor.
And and
it is on site as well. Yeah, it is on our website as well at ppacg.org. That tail end of my email. So ppacg.org. If you go to the aging section, you'll see that it's continually updated online. And it is printed. We did have to put a hold on printing because our distribution sites would not let us in during COVID. So we put it still says 2020, but we have a 22 version at the printer as we speak. Yay, we're very excited.
Yeah, and I think most of the AAAs have something similar. Yes. Okay. Are there other questions, folks? I have a few if you don't. So
I have a quick question. My name is Danielle. I'm with Colorado Legal Services. I was just curious, does the AAA offer any assistance with housing, such as subsidies or contracts with? I mean, I know AAA does a lot of services within people's homes, but what about housing itself?
So I can start with that. My AAA does not offer housing assistance, financial assistance. However, we do try and connect people in search of housing with affordable housing resources, housing authorities, and those kind of things. And here in my region, we are partnering with CASA and trying to build a supportive housing for kids aging out of foster care and older adults at risk of homelessness. So I think some of the AAAs do get involved with housing just because there's so much homelessness in older adults going on, but my AAA does not have any funding assistance for housing.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Eva's saying, I think that's probably pretty similar for most of the AAAs, that we definitely have the capacity of financial assistance for one-time rent or those types of supports. However, the sort of larger issue facing many in the state is more layered, and many times we're involved on the planning groups trying to really highlight and focus the needs for older adults in terms of that area of like a systemic issue related to housing, which is a huge issue for all. So really trying to figure out where to put our efforts. But there would not be any specific subsidy that would be coming through or entitlement in terms of that. That would be separate through the other agencies. Sorry, I got a little frog in my throat.
Yeah, and I would have to echo that as well. Where we have found assistance is in where we can best serve, because our funding does not allow direct housing assistance. Typically, we would provide case management funding to other organizations within our region to provide housing navigation. And that is focused on typically assisting folks with getting into housing, whether it's transitional or what might be considered permanent. We do partner with a lot of organizations in town to make sure that we're aware of who and what and where, but we're just not allowed to spend the funds that we have. And again, while we talked about, we have to. The one thing that I can't reiterate more is that today's presentation, please understand there's a lot of generalities too, because of our different overall agency oversight, as well as our funding sources. So while we do have the Older Americans Act funds, the Older Coloradans Act funds, some of us, because we may be connected to a county or Department of Human Services, may have a different stream of funding that I wouldn't. Some nonprofits may have grants that I would not, and so on. And so it is important to understand that it is crucial for the area that you're looking for services in that you contact that AAA. And there was a question in the chat around the Denver. Oh, thank you, Bob. Awesome. You're on it. Thank you. Someone was asking about the DRCOG, and that it is referred to as DRCOG. That's not an individual. That's Denver Regional Council of Governments. You can always tell who's new in the business when they refer to DRCOG as a he. So,
which is by itself kind of sexist, isn't it?
True. What other questions can we answer?
So there was a mention of the SHIP program earlier. I'm sure not everyone knows what that means. So can you explain what that is, please?
Yes, it's the state health insurance program, and it's a process of offering, I mean, it depends on the location, but really we call it, Medicare counseling, if you will, where we go through the process of helping individuals understand what they have access to and what they should sign up for. And many of us have sort of a hybrid program where we've got staff that are focused on it, who are trained in it specifically from the state of Colorado. And then we also have additional volunteers, classes, individual meetings, one-on-one, and a myriad of different options in each community, depending. Eva, I know you took off your microphone if there's other things to add.
Yeah, and in conjunction with the SHIP, we also house the SMP, which is the Senior Medicare Patrol, and that's identifying and helping resolve Medicare fraud issues. So if somebody gets an explanation of benefits and they need help deciphering it, or we had a case a couple of years ago where somebody got they went ahead and ordered a brace of some kind because Medicare was supposed to pay for it, and Medicare did pay for it, but then this company got their number and started sending them all kinds of other braces that Medicare did not pay for. So our SMP certified people help them resolve that and get those charges reversed. And so that's a form of Medicare fraud that we also address.
And I'll speak to, we have both of those trained individuals here in Region 4 as well with SHIP and the SMP programs. Those are a mix of staff and volunteers for us as well.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more? What's the relationship of AAAs to the Meals on Wheels program? How does that work?
That's a great question, Bob. I'll start and then. So it depends on the community. I feel like that's a little bit of a theme of our presentation in terms of the arrangement. So for Meals on Wheels, and we can use Region 3B Boulder County, where historically there's been sort of some payment from the AAA to the Meals on Wheels programs. And then through various times in history, my understanding, because it was before I was in this role, that some of our local Meals on Wheels programs have really not wanted to accept federal money because, of course, with federal and state money, there are regulations that have to be followed. And so some of our Meals on Wheels programs have actually, before COVID, not accepted money from the AAA. However, it's really important that we know that the service that Meals on Wheels provides is, vital and necessary. So we want to be collaborative and supportive. So in Boulder County, that's been, we were not initially because they were not wanting to accept it. However, through the pandemic, one of the unanticipated, possibly some might say positive thing, is that a lot of the regulations were relieved for a period of time, which increased some flexibility for us and really allowed those Meals on Wheels programs to accept the AAA resources. That's a really technical, specific example, but in general, across the state, depending on the Meals on Wheels programs in the region that crosses over with the AAA, they're working together to support the ongoing meal provision, whether it's in the congregate site or if it's in delivery. Jody and Eva, I'm sure you can speak to your areas as well or additional parts, but I think Boulder's got a little bit of a unique situation with that. So just stating that, of course, we contract for those services. So it really depends on sort of the local Meals on Wheels leadership and programming in terms of how they're going to bring in the federal and state monies with the regulations that come along with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, in Region 4, we have a primary meal provider that we contract with here in El Paso County. They also provide some meals up into Woodland Park in Teller County. And but more specifically, they receive a blend of funding from us for home delivered meals, as well as funding from Meals on Wheels programs. And so they can access and adjust that funding as they need to meet the needs as best possible. And so for us, it works out as a best case scenario because they're not wholly reliant on just Older Americans Act and Older Coloradans Act funding or the requirements that come with them. And so if they have someone who is an in-between spot that may qualify for Meals on Wheels, but perhaps not our Older Americans Act home delivered meals requirements, then they are able to serve that community member.
Yeah, and we also have kind of a hybrid. We had a couple of meal sites in one of our frontier areas close due to loss of staff, and so we found a company called Mom's Meals, and we're providing home delivered meals that way. So it still meets the requirements of the federal grant. So we're still able to fund that. We have a hot meals program that does also meet the requirements. And then we use another funding stream for meals that don't meet the requirements. So yeah, we all just get creative about how we do it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and I would share one of the exciting projects that it's still in process, but came out of the idea of how best to serve. As you know, Park County is a very low population county, but very broad geographically. And our provider there, who provides most of the services through vouchers, in other words, I have contractors, they have contractors, or individuals who agree to do services for a certain rate, and that voucher is the way that they confirm services and get paid. But their executive director and I were just, talking about some ideas, and their concern was how to get meals from Fair Play in bad weather out to other regions, other small communities across the county. And what they came up with was really exciting. It originated with freezers in bear boxes. Fortunately, it expanded beyond that because I encouraged them to talk to their county commissioners, one of whom sits on our board of directors, and said, maybe there's another way, because big bear boxes to fit a freezer, that's going to be expensive. So what they did is they are now actually have a space in firehouses and community centers across the county with a freezer, with those frozen meals. They have volunteers who have access to those, who can restock and also pick up and deliver those meals directly into their community. And so what I hope you take from that is the idea sharing that all AAAs we live by. Our goal is to really look at the problem, be forward focused, solution driven, to make sure that our community members, wherever they are receiving the services as best they can. Ultimately, if someone chose to live in Park County in retirement and they can continue to live there safely with just a few extra supports, then we're going to do what we can to make sure that happens. Sometimes it comes to a point where they have to make a change in their living situation, and whatever that might look like, we're there, our contractors are there, our providers are there to continue helping them as best we can.
We spend a lot of time brainstorming together as well.
Yes, we do.
We rely heavily on our peers in this network.
So that kind of brings up another question at the same time. Having these conversations about how to get food to people. How many people do you think actually need those kinds of food delivery and congregate meal services in the state of Colorado? I mean, over the age of 60. I mean, is not so much a number, but is it a few or many or a lot, or, can you talk about that a little bit?
I could jump in just in terms of our county being a mixture of urban and rural, and sort of the mountain areas around, which it really has brought forward that there are quite a few people in need of food resources. So that could look like going to the congregate meal, having a meal, and connecting with others. It can look like going to the congregate meal site and picking up a meal and taking it home based on what might be happening for that individual and their family. And it also can look like food delivery, which can happen from a congregate meal site, or there are separate organizations now that are fully set up to just deliver meals. So what we have found is, for those individuals who someone might call, a rugged individual wanting to be in the mountains and not really connect with the rest of society, maybe they're aging in their home and they really have historically not wanted to be connected with services. We can deliver a meal to them and start the process of connecting with them about other opportunities that AAA has. But I would say there are quite a few people. So again, Bob, it's a great question. I don't know that I would know the number off the top of my head for necessarily either my region or the state as a whole, but I would say it's a very large portion of what we fund across all the AAAs are the food resources. The other added part of it is there's a lot of education about nutrition, as well as like individual nutrition counseling that can be offered also. So it's a full continuum, and I would say there are a lot of folks that need it. In addition to, I just thought of one more thing, which is certainly the pandemic really exacerbated all of those needs, right? And really increased the number of people that needed food delivery, whether that's a meal delivery or it's actual groceries delivered, and both were happening. So, and continue to happen. So I don't know if Jody or Eva, you would add more, but.
I think that's a great summary, because some of the changes and the flexibility we were provided during the time of COVID have started to be rolled back. However, some of the flexibility is still there. So individuals may choose to self-declare that they are homebound, where that required a full assessment previously, but that is also in the process of being rolled back. So the flexibility we had to make sure that people did not go without was crucial for us during the time of COVID. One of my providers in Teller County approached me about 5 months in and said, you know, no one's gone hungry who's asked. But on the other hand, they've been eating, it's been canned food, boxed food, dry food, you know, for 4 months now, 5 months. We would like to contract with restaurants in our community to ultimately become a win-win-win. The senior gets a hot meal, the restaurant gets income where it was so challenging before, and we can keep our volunteers active and checking in on our seniors. And so it was a win regardless of the perspective. And, you know, it really worked out well. It was a short-term solution. There was a rotation. You know, it wasn't 5 days a week for every person, obviously, but it was an interesting rotation, an interesting way to come up with a solution to give a little bit of real life back to folks who were, by governor's orders and necessity, confined to their homes. And so we continue to see ongoing growth in the food provision. It looks a little different now in the congregate meal programs for my region than it did pre-COVID. Some of my meal sites that had 40, 50, 80 people at any given time are now in the, you know, maybe 20 or 30, maybe 40 or 50 when they were previously serving 80 people. So we're not quite back to pre-COVID numbers, but we continue to see that need because there is right now that flexibility. Maybe they do show up on Monday for lunch, but they also grab and go 3 to 4 frozen meals to take home. So they're still getting some socialization activities and access to community events, but they're also able to balance that with their own personal needs around exposure, potential exposure, or whatever their own personal circumstances are.
Okay, thank you. So bottom line is there are a lot of people who need food and you're helping them get it. So that, and if you didn't exist, I mean, how would they get it? So good for you folks. Another question, you know, you mentioned funding a little bit earlier. And so from my knowledge of how the funding system works for the AAAs, you know, there's money that comes from the feds and there's money that comes from the state. But the money it's not necessarily locked in every year. So that's where some of the advocacy comes in. Can you address the advocacy in relation to the funding for the AAAs, and also how much does that funding constrict the services that you're able to provide?
You know, I'm going to jump in here, Eva and Christine, since I just got back from the policy conference last week. So last week, US Aging, which is our national association of AAAs, every year they host a policy and legislative conference where they bring in legislators, staff of legislators, others who are advocates around policy and legislative issues, specifically focused on our aging population. That was the topic du jour, I tell you, because we are in a place right now where the president's recommended budget came out Monday. In fact, Monday a week ago, and we were sitting in a board meeting, and they announced that the president's a budget had just been released and that they would have updates for us before the end of the meeting. And they did. They had highlights around some of the potential growth, not as high as what is needed, not as high as what has been advocated for, but at least it's in the positive and the upward slope on a given line chart. But that advocacy for ongoing funding is crucial because Bob, your slide very early on in the introduction really spoke to that. By 2039, we're going to have more people over the age of 60 than those under the age of 18. We're all getting older, and the reality is, as of right now, we don't have enough funds to truly answer the need of every single person. And so wait lists, while necessary, give us all a little bit of the shivers, because we want to make sure that we're serving every person who has the need and who fits within our qualifications. But it's important for us as individuals. It's important for us as individual AAA directors, as our statewide association, and ultimately our national association, to keep that at the forefront, because it's imperative to being able to offer the services. And it was shared earlier as well, not just the services, but this new SB 290 funds that we're working through right now with the state really answers the question and provides a resource for the infrastructure for that growth that we're going to be seeing and that we're already seeing. And so being able to add funds like that recent legislated fund specifically for AAAs and other senior services is a really, really good first step. You may be familiar with the American Rescue Plan, or the ARPA. You might see that on the news. There were specific American Rescue Plan Act funds set aside for aging services. And so each AAA has received a portion of those that don't have to be shared with city or county. They are specifically AAA funds that we can access. And so yet another resource for us to look at infrastructure and capital growth, so that we can serve the number of seniors, the number of older adults that we know are coming. We don't use the word silver tsunami anymore. We've gotten away from that because we're in it. We're in the growth. It's not coming, it's just getting bigger. And we know that we have to do things now to plan and accommodate for that increased growth of our older population.
Eva, Christine, do you want to add anything to that, or?
I think I would that was a great summary of what the AAAs are facing. I think I would just add that your statement or question, Bob, about it not being it changing each year. There's an interstate funding formula that each AAA is under in terms of the amount of money they receive. So that changes based on population, based on some other factors that the State Unit on Aging does the calculation for the money coming through. It is, as the population has changed, movement has changed, growth has changed, that changes the amount. So in this really interesting unintended way, certain regions end up getting disproportionately negatively impacted by their funding. So what happened, and then some have the reverse happening. So it's just important to consider that we really have diversified funding in addition to the state and federal funding, which is most of us as AAA, or all of us as AAA directors, is on our mind, right? So those of us who are nonprofits are doing fundraising at times. Those of us who are associated with a county are really trying to have the county engage with general fund monies, because really, again, the population's so large that you can't really have a region not have enough money to serve, which is why we're trying to talk about it being a statewide issue, right? It's a statewide focus for us to advocate that there's enough resources to support older adults. And it shouldn't just be one region can do it and one region can't, because we want all older adults in Colorado to be successful and age where they want to. So I would just add that in terms of some of the complicated nature of the situation for us. So
Yeah, when it comes to government, there's nothing simple.
absolutely.
And I would point out that there was a question in the chat from Christy, I believe it was Christy Ziegler. This really speaks to that, because while the amount of people that we can serve varies from region to region based on our funding formula, the reality is that that is always at the top of our mind, is how are we going to best serve our community? Sometimes that's taking services internally to take out to the community. Sometimes that's contracting with an outside provider whose specialty is that area of service. And so the more funding we have directly translates to more services being able to be offered.
Mhm.
So one other thing I wanted to make sure we bring up here, we talked about the 60 plus, but we haven't said anything about income restrictions, or not so much restrictions, I guess, kind of thresholds. So as you're sorting through, the requests that you get and, your case managers, is income one of the factors that's included? And, can you talk about that?
I'll take this one. So we are not allowed to means test. We do need to target our services, and we are allowed to do that. The federal regulations allow us to target services to those in the greatest need. And so that's social, economic needs. So if people are living at poverty or below, that's one of our targeting criteria. Minority and rural or frontier, and people with Alzheimer's or dementia also trigger. So if somebody falls into any of those categories, or in some cases multiple categories, they're going to have a higher targeting score. So if we have a waiting list for any reason, whether that's a fiscal issue or a provider shortage or anything like that, those are the people that are going to move to the top of the list. And people with more resources or who don't meet those targeting criteria are going to fall farther down the list, if that makes sense. So we do not means test. We're not allowed to do so. And I do want to mention, there is no charge for any of the services that we provide. We do encourage folks to make a donation, and we have suggested donations for all of the programs that we provide, but nobody is denied service for an inability to make any kind of a donation.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that question? Does anyone else have a question before, we're getting close to the end here. So I know I've been asking a lot of questions, but does anybody else have one that they would like to ask? Okay. I have one last thing, and that is, how can we, collectively, this group and the people that we touch, all of us, help you reach more people, to let more people know what your services are? So what are your suggestions around that? And then we'll wrap up.
When you encounter friends, neighbors, people in general, I mean, we're all getting older every day, just as Christine said, and we're all going to be in this position where we're either going to need services, we're going to be providing services, or maybe we are going to be in that position where we're in the sandwich and we're on both ends of it. So for goodness sake, help us spread the word that if you know of somebody that's in need, call the AAAs. We really are the trusted resource for aging services.
I would
for a long time.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I would also include, if you are connected at any point with any policy making or legislative folks, whether that's town council, city council, county commissioners, anything like that, the number one thing is really raising awareness. Just because it is federally and state funded doesn't mean that that funding can't drop, as Bob alluded to earlier. It also doesn't mean that it's guaranteed for every single individual, simply because of the amount of people that we have in our region to serve and the needs that we're trying to meet with the funds that we do have. And so if there are opportunities to raise awareness around aging issues, there are also volunteer opportunities within every AAA. It looks a little different, but we have volunteer opportunities that vary everything from regional advisory council boards to volunteer service provision. So we'd love to get more people involved and just seek out opportunities in your region to connect with your AAA.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone. This has been great. I've seen several positive comments in the chat, and as we mentioned earlier, we have recorded this. It will be posted on the AgeWise Colorado website within a few days. I mean, it takes us just a little bit of time to edit out some of the sputters in the beginning, and then we get that accomplished, and then we get it posted up on our website. And we also have a YouTube channel, which we put all the recordings on the YouTube channel as well. So once again, thanks everybody for joining us today, and thanks so much to our presenters. So we appreciate you being here and all you do for the people.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you
All right.
very much, Bob.
All right. Have a great day. All right.
Bye all.